name is Marcia Chatlin. I'm a professor of history and African American studies at Georgetown University. I'm a historian of African American life and culture. Juneteenth is a commemoration holiday of June 19th, 1865, when a group of African Americans in Galveston, Texas, received the news that they indeed were free. President Lincoln had signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, but news of the end of slavery in Texas had not traveled to this community until 1865. Since then, Juneteenth has been a day of commemoration of the struggle against slavery and a celebration of freedom. One of the biggest misconceptions about Juneteenth is that people often think that was the day that slavery ended in the United States. But in fact, the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States, was passed in the Senate on April 8, 1864, and the House on January 31st, 1865. Although Juneteenth celebrates the knowledge that slavery had ended, it's important to remember that the conditions that mirrored slavery, whether it was Jim Crow or the suppression of civil rights or continued struggles to fight racism, those continued long after the end of slavery. And so the Juneteenth holiday reminds us of where we've come, and it also inspires us to think about the places we want to go. As African Americans left the South to pursue opportunities throughout the 20th century in northern and western cities, the celebration of Juneteenth moved from being a Texas-based celebration to a national one, in which people gathered with families and friends and community to remember the incredible struggle of a people against slavery and to create new traditions that allowed them to reflect about the struggle for civil rights and the ongoing struggle against racism. Although slavery was abolished in 1865, the fight for civil rights has continued to the present day. So Juneteenth provides people with a sense of encouragement and inspiration to continue to fight on behalf of their community and their families for freedom. And it also is a holiday that, as it continues to become more and more popular, it allows people to look back at the past and encourages them to learn more about African American history. As more and more institutions recognize Juneteenth and work to commemorate the incredible legacy of slavery in the United States, I hope Juneteenth becomes a day where people commit not only to acts of justice in their local community, but to investigate history in a more deep and thoughtful way.
Well, welcome to another edition of the Good Life Podcast. This is episode 4, and we're really excited to have you with us today. My name is Adrian Walker. I'm serving as one of your co-hosts, and I have the lucky opportunity of serving with the lovely young lady next to me. I'll let her introduce herself.
Stop it. No, please continue. No, hey guys, I'm Ebonie. So happy to be here. Good topics, good discussion. It's the good life.
It's the great life, and we're really excited about today's conversation, as we're really going to talk about Juneteenth, what that is, and kind of localize it to what's going on here in the community. And that brings me to our guest today, Mr. Jarvis Richardson, and we are so lucky to have him with us today. Before we go into the conversation, though, I do want to provide the opportunity for Jarvis to tell us a little bit about who he is and kind of, the arc of his career and how did he get to where he is today.
All right. Well, it's good to be on with Adrian and Ebonie. I know both of them pretty personally, and I count myself privileged to be connected to the two of them. Awesome people, definitely living a good life. I'm Jarvis Richardson. I am definitely a Flint native, born and raised here, Flint, Northwestern Wildcat. I've had an opportunity to contribute a number of different things to the community. I know that we're talking about the Juneteenth celebration. My background is I left Flint and went away to Mississippi and went to college. Finished at Alcorn State University. Stayed down there for a few years and ended up relocating back. My background has always been professionally accounting, but when I began to delve into my career, I understood that my connection was to people. And so I began to be involved more so in youth development and educational roles, having served as a 21st Century Site Coordinator, having served as a director of a program called Project Ready through the Urban League of Detroit and Southeastern Michigan, and facilitated that in several schools, and having taken the role that I'm in now. Currently, I'm the general manager for Southwest Food Service Excellence over Pontiac School District. And so I still kind of delve in those youth development and educational realms, just with more kind of an accounting background and overseeing the experience of students in the actual National School Lunch Program and breakfast program and snack program and dinner program. So still kind of have that community or the village type mindset and serving my community.
That's what's up.
I've had the opportunity to be involved in the yeah.
Go, Adrian.
No, I was just gonna say that's what's up, Jarvis. It's almost weird, like you said, you've been knowing us forever. So you worked with my mom, and it's interesting because when I met you as Mr. Richardson. So it's almost weird calling you Jarvis.
No, that's so
amazing.
You've had such an impact in youth. Like I met you when I was younger. So we just want to take the time to just salute you and thank you for what you've been in the community and how you've been a part of our lives, like personally. And I'm sure as other people are watching this and seeing you, they can say the same. So like, let's just dive deep into it. Like, let's get straight to it. So Juneteenth, Adrian and I were talking earlier, and we were just sharing about how we've sort of heard Juneteenth and seen certain things. But for me personally, I didn't really come into the full understanding or knowledge of what Juneteenth was until a few years ago. What about you, Adrian?
Yeah, for me, my dad is from Georgia. He's from the South. My mom is, of course, from Flint, Michigan. So I was baptized in the Juneteenth really earlier with my dad being from the South. But even now, there are different parts of Juneteenth as I get more into the detail that I get a chance to learn a little bit more about. So again, for me, learning again at 34, it's important that, we just never assume. And Jarvis, that's why I think one of the first questions that we just wanted to ask you was just from your perspective, what is Juneteenth?
I've had an opportunity to be involved in it for quite some time, and really, the thing I've always gotten from it has been the unification of it. When you even talk about my relationship with the two of you, it is inspired by what we call the village. We grew up in the village. It's the uncle, the brother, the cousin who leaves and comes back and brings things to the community that may not have been there. They bring that resource. Ebony, your dad was my fraternity brother. And so we had ties in church, and to watch you grow up and grow into this wonderful young woman who is taking over. I mean, making it happen. And then Adrian, growing up, watching you grow up with your brother and knowing the investment that your mom made, and taking care of you and growing you up, and you're on the school board and having done all the things that you've done on the state level. That, to me, that's Juneteenth. Juneteenth is the village. And we've always wanted to try to create that type of atmosphere, kind of the village atmosphere. And that's what the celebration really has always been. People who have passed on, who are no longer a part of the celebration. Catherine Blake and her mother, who were part of Juneteenth for years. We lost them to COVID. But they represented the village. And so that's kind of what it's always been. It's been the village. It's this life, this good life that we live, manifested in the celebration.
Can you explain just a brief history lesson? So I appreciate you breaking it down and bringing it right into our neighborhood, our community, our streets, our families. But can you just talk a little bit about the history too, just for someone that may be watching that knows like nothing about where Juneteenth even derived from?
So in 1865, there was an order that had actually gone down previous to 1865 to let all of the slaves know that they were free. And in 1865, the last slaves in a town called Galveston, Texas, were made aware because of this announcement. And this announcement was like, it was called like Announcement 3 or something to that effect. But it was sent down by a general who basically made the statement that slaves were no longer in bondage, and that the relationship between slaves and slave owners was no longer slave and slave owner, but now employer and employee. So that they had rights and that they had privileges as freed human beings and no longer slaves. And so that's really why we call it our African American Independence Day, because none of us were free until all of us were free. And so that was when all of us had the mentality and the mindset that, hey, we are no longer under this unjust leadership or rulership. We are now free to be employee and employer. Now, we know, of course, that there were Jim Crow laws and discrimination and things of that sort. But as far as being slaves, we were no longer slaves as of June 19th, 1865.
No, Jarvis, that's really good information and insight from you. You know, me and Ebony were talking earlier. And, you know, when we were coming up in school, one of the, you know, things that, you know, we learned as it related to Independence Day was July 4th, 1776, right? The original question, you know, one of the first questions that we asked was, when did you learn about it? And again, for me, I was lucky to have a father from the South who was ingrained in Juneteenth and knew everything about it. But not everyone had that same perspective, especially, you know, for generations to come. From your perspective, why do you think that potentially this isn't something that's touched on more within, you know, within our history as we're going through schools?
I think that one of the things that we've been experiencing, even if you look at Black Wall Street, which has literally recently been exposed, is that there are a lot of things that have happened in the history of African Americans and have happened in the history of Africa that we've not known, that we've not been educated on, that either has not been passed down or has not been widespread known. And so that's why, you know, we ought to really be careful when giving out information that we not only have the research on it, but know the background of it. It's important that we are diligent in finding out this kind of information. I didn't find out about Juneteenth until I relocated back and Paul introduced me to it. I had heard of the celebration, but in a state like Mississippi, they didn't celebrate it. Just another state over in Louisiana, I didn't know about any widespread celebrations. I found out about the celebration when I moved here. But it's interesting that there's so much culture that we don't know about. I have a close friend who I went to college with who literally lives in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And there is so much history that we miss out on that he has been able to educate me on from just the aspect of other parts of Africa that we don't know about. And so we've talked about doing some type of foreign exchange program because he's been over there for 15 years and he knows so much as far as sharing the history of Africa and even the history of Africans who have gone to America.
I think that's very powerful. And like you said, just we can grab a hold to holidays and we don't even know the true meaning behind them, if we should or shouldn't be celebrating them, what it truly means. And so I appreciate you for just sharing it and breaking it down in such a tangible way. As it relates to the city of Flint and the Juneteenth celebration, how did you get involved, and how I know you played a very pivotal part in helping to strengthen the faith-based community and their involvement in more of the activities. So walk us through just how you got on board.
So in 2002, I relocated from Mississippi back to Michigan. And I started working for an organization called the Urban League of Flint, a community-based organization, kind of the thing I needed to do and the thing I wanted to do. So there was a guy named Paul Herring who was doing a taping for one of his shows because he does stuff on public access television. And so Paul said, he was doing these auditions and he was like, hey, you want to come and try out for the show? So I'm like, I got a little bit of free time. Why not? Sure. Went and tried out for the show and ended up being one of his hosts on a show called Common Ground. And we talked about a lot of community affairs, stuff around Flint. And I've had the opportunity to interview up and coming authors from Flint and things of that sort, up and coming educators and that kind of thing. But one of the things that I remember most was Paul letting me know in May that I was already drafted to be a part of this Juneteenth celebration. And so I'm like, okay, you volunteered me that I'm a part of this, so help me understand what we're doing. And he did. He was able to help me understand the all-inclusiveness of it. And I think that that's the thing that I loved about it more than anything, is that Paul always made things all-inclusive. Now, he's unapologetically Black, don't get me wrong, but he's always had a way of including other cultures in unity. And isn't that what it's really all about? You know, you go back and look at history, King didn't face issues until he began to unify races. Malcolm X didn't face issues until he began to unify races. So it was a bigger picture. And so, I've been in ministry in Flint for a number of years. We launched our church in 2004, which my was the senior pastor of now Due Season Family Life Center. And Paul had a block of time during the Juneteenth celebration. He used to carry it on pretty much the whole week, and it would culminate on Sunday. So he would start and do it like Wednesday. He would have like a slam poetry event. And Thursday, he'd have an event where he'd allow local secular artists to utilize their craft and have a block party. He would do things on Friday, different Friday events. He would have jazz artists that would come out and do jazz on Fridays and Saturdays. Saturdays are more kind of your family-friendly event where they would have, a lot of the vendors downtown and doing the ice machines and snow cones and things of that sort. And then on Sunday, there was a Sunday service. So we had this big block of time that was a Sunday service. And rather than do our Sunday service and then go and do his service, we decided to just make our morning service the Juneteenth service, and we did it at noon. And so we would go downtown and do the Juneteenth service at noon. And I had other constituents that were in ministry with me that I would always, give an opportunity to come and minister if they wanted to. And so Joseph Johnson from House of Glory, he came and he ministered. And John D. Lee, who is in Texas right now, he's had an opportunity to come and minister. And I've had other ministers who have come from Lansing, Michigan, who came to minister. And the latter part of that block was a gospel celebration. And when I first got started, Kent Key was over that. He would have First Samuel come and MC. And so Kent had other obligations as the years progressed, working on his PhD. And so Kent kind of dropped it in my lap. And so I began to kind of work with it. And we had several groups and artists who had the opportunity to come and minister. Ebony and Adrian, you both know I sung with just about every one of Jerome's groups. So Praise has come down and they've ministered, and Ken Martin and the Voices in Praise have come and ministered, and I believe Jerome had a praise team come and minister at one time, and there have been dance ministries down there. There have been Greater Holy Temple, their choir has sung. Roger Jones had a group, and his group sung, and he had a jazz trio, and they played. And Sean Harden, who used to sing background for Diedrich Haddon, he had a group called Obadiah that came out of Detroit. And Gail Brandon came down and he ministered in music with us. So we've had a gambit of gospel artists who have come down, and it used to be where we would start at 5, and sometimes we'd have to have artists fill that time, but it was able to really carry on and carry itself from 5 o'clock to even 10 o'clock in the evening, having the Mighty Bank Sisters come down and sing, and a number of other quartets and gospel artists who came down and participated. So, there were a lot of people from the city of Flint who were involved, in church groups and in ministries who really got behind the Juneteenth celebration and developed it and made it who it was.
So Jarvis, as you talk about that piece of involvement, you mentioned a lot of things that I just want to touch on. One of them, you talked about the multicultural piece and how there was intentionality around that. But something that we've been talking about during this podcast is making sure that this celebration isn't lost with a generation, right? So in hearing from you, there seems to be also some intentionality around making sure that youth were involved in some of the programmatic aspects of the Juneteenth program. Could you talk about that a little bit more? And just again, what was the intentionality of making sure that they were embedded within it?
Yeah, so the thing that I've always prided Paul with is that he's always involved his family in Juneteenth, inclusive of his sons. If they weren't behind the camera, they were helping with the PSAs, they were helping with the commercials, and both of them have grown up and moved on to become a great consultant and great cameramen. Paul's youngest son, Marcus, is in California right now doing a videotaping for a cable channel right now. He just got back from St. Catherine. So he's always had that family aspect involved. And so he would have young people involved from the parade to the barbecue at Max Brannon Park, to there being some type of unity awards where young people were honored. Scholarships had been given out. The dodgeball games that had not only young adults, but young people involved in the dodgeball games. I mean, there was always this aspect of young people being involved, from grabbing the microphone and talking about Juneteenth, reciting their poetry, reciting an essay that they wrote about being proud to be who they were, them having advertisements in tabloids. He was always very mindful to include the NAACP, the Urban League in that. It was always all inclusive, even inclusive of race. And so, there were always people who were from Korea, who were from China, who from the indigenous nation, who were involved in the Juneteenth celebration. And Paul always made sure that was something that had happened. And I'm grateful for that, because I had an opportunity to be exposed to so much more because of Paul's openness to be inclusive of race and ethnicity.
I'm so glad you said that, because I think sometimes when we are celebrating our holidays or holidays that are specific to our culture, I think sometimes we forget the responsibility and the opportunity that resides in educating others, like not just educating ourselves, not just us coming together to celebrate our holiday, but also the duty that we have to bring other ethnicities in. And like you said, it is about unification as well. So I'm so glad that you touched on that, because as we pass the baton, and like Adrian said, not let it get lost, or even the why and the purpose not get lost in generations. I'm glad that you said that. Just thinking about Juneteenth and the celebration all together, like, can you speak to the upcoming generations that are sort of taking the mantle and running with it? Like, what advice would you give the generations that are coming up behind us that really want to take this and run with it? What are some of the things that they should remember and grab a hold to? And then how do you empower them to take it 10 steps forward and be innovative? Like, how do you bridge the old with the new? How do you accept, the history, but also be a forerunner and innovator to make this even better?
So the first thing I thought about when you asked about being inclusive of generations and being inclusive of other people was the talk that you and I happened to be a part of when we were talking about the water crisis and how they had people from every decade who had the opportunity to talk. And I would say that it would be the same mindset, Ebony, that we had when we were having that dialogue. We were intentional about expressing where we came from and what our generation thought, but we were also very careful to embrace what came before us and the people that came before us and understanding where their mindset is. I do professional development and consulting, and one of the things that I talk about that is one of my kind of trademark trainings is about the intergenerational workplace or the multi-generational workplace and how there are 5 to 6 generations in the workplace and how everyone has a different set of values, but it doesn't devalue their importance. Even though you've got a generation that was born in 5 screens, you've also got a generation who knows what it is to use an iron, who knows what it is to, be at work 15 minutes early, 30 minutes early, and that's considered being on time. And there's just a different set of values. So it's about embracing the values of one another. And one thing I would say, in order not to forget where we came from, to begin to have dialogue while we have time now, because it's a very real thing that COVID and underlying health issues to COVID have caused us to lose a lot of people and a lot of people of wisdom and knowledge that were in generations before us. And if we don't hear from them, the stories that they need to pass down, that's a whole lot of knowledge and a whole generation gap that we have. I, in a sense, have to apologize and take responsibility for my generation because we were the first generation who said that we will raise our children to be our friends. And sometimes in doing that, we forgot about what we learned to make us who we were. And so we forgot to pass a lot of those things that are valuable down and forgot to pass a lot of that history down. And so it is incumbent upon us who are still alive and functioning within that generation that can still remember to begin to gather those things from our ancestors and gather those things from our forefathers and pass those things down that are knowledgeable and that are helpful while still being all inclusive and while still being embracing of culture and while still not being biased to understand where our place is and where our place was in being the leaders now, because we were, the little brothers and the nephews, and now we're the fathers and the uncles and the older cousins now who are involved in what used to be. And so now we have a responsibility.
That's so powerful, and I feel like you just came and dropped the mic on us for real. Like seriously, because I think even what you said about that really translates far beyond Juneteenth, and even is a lesson to how we navigate in community, how we navigate with one another. And I'm glad you brought it up because sometimes we can tiptoe around that or around the responsibility or even where the ball was dropped intergenerationally sometimes. Because I saw that. I saw where there was a generation that was very aware, but was just like, okay, sort of like blocking out what happened and trying to create something new, all the while not knowing that there is power in both where we've been, where we are, and where we're desiring to go. So I'm so thank you for touching that. I know Adrian had a question to ask as well.
Yeah, I just have a follow-up, and you kind of touched on it a little bit. So, we've come a long way since our ancestors came here in 1619 as a people, right? We've seen a lot of first, and, we've made some rich history. And I love the opportunity to celebrate, Black history as it relates to Juneteenth, but then also February. But Jarvis, if I'm honest, something that I think about a lot is how do we make sure that, we celebrate this 365? Right? That is just not isolated to one day. Yes, we definitely need to pay respect and homage to that day. And again, the month of February, which we know is the shortest month. But for me, I want to go beyond that. I want to make sure that this is something that is 365, that is something that is embedded into us like everything else is. So from your perspective, what do you think that we can do? And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but to make sure, again, that this isn't just isolated to one date or 1 month. How can we make sure that this is 365?
So I feel like you guys have the opportunity to really be innovative because of things like Zoom and things like StreamYard, where you can begin to make cyber timelines where you celebrate or you give a moment in African American history or in African history of things that you've learned and that you've seen. Again, I saw a PDF of all of the massacres that had occurred in African American communities that weren't even talked about, that were beyond the Black Wall Street. And so I think it's about highlighting those times. I think it's about educating those who are younger than us, taking the opportunity to do what we used to do back in the day. We would come home from college and we would go to the high school and talk to the high school class or talk to the junior high school class. I know that, things are a little bit different now than they used to be, but I think that, you take those opportunities to mentor, to pour into family, to pour into friends, to pour into younger relatives and educate them on what you've learned that they don't know.
That's great. We want to both thank you for being a part of our conversation today. It's interesting. You all's work that you all, embarked upon in 2002 has built up to, what we're looking forward to this weekend, which is basically a series of very important events that starts on June 18th. It goes into the weekend, and I even believe there's the 20th anniversary of the Unity March. That is, I believe, June 26th. So I know there'll be a flyer that, we'll share after this podcast that will have all of those events listed. But we're really excited about what's going to be taking place this weekend. I know I'll be out there, and, we're encouraging all of our, listeners that are local to come out, but local even within your community, wherever you are, look up the Juneteenth celebration and really get a chance to get out there and, celebrate.
I was trying to be so professional. But we are 100% real on this podcast.
Come on. Hey, Ebonie. Hey.
Ebonie saw me relive Black history from the family reunion aspect, swatting this bug that's flying around.
Yeah. Ain't Mr. B.
That's part of our culture too.
I was trying to keep it together the first two times. That third time took me out.
I got him that third time, though. I got him that third time.
It was really the second time, because when I tell you, you brought all of our culture, you swatted and then looked for it.
Come on.
I was out of here. I was really trying to keep my Oprah on and keep my Oprah face, but I couldn't. And then you smiled and just took me out of here. Hey,
I saw the smoke on your face.
I was trying to keep it together, y'all. So to our listening audience, you already know how we are. We are 100% real. on the Good Life podcast, so you see it happen in real time. Okay, we might have to break that down as a meme. You
or slow mo,
Right. Listen, y'all know it's hot and them bugs are flying the door real quick.
Come on.
And if you ain't got a swatter, you better use a towel or something.
Yeah.
Be a swatter, okay?
Come on.
Right.
But no, Adrian, I know you were gonna highlight some of the upcoming events for Juneteenth.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention some of the events that we have coming up again, starting June 18th. There's a number of different events. There's the Black Wall Street event at Burston from 3 to 6. June 19th, you have the traditional Juneteenth celebration at Max Brandon Park from 12 to 4:30. You have a Champions Parade that's going to start also at 12 p.m. It'll start at Flint City Hall and go down to Burston Fieldhouse. There'll be a fair there in downtown Flint. There'll be a Juneteenth celebration from 4 to 8. That next day on June 20th from 3 to 6 p.m., you have a gospel festival taking place at Riverbank Park. Mr. Richardson, I don't know if you're singing in it or not this year, but
no,
maybe you'll be featured.
I'm not singing it this year. I'll be a participant in the audience.
Right. And again, just the June 26th is the 20th annual Unity March. And that will start at 11 a.m. At 6202 DuPont Street. So we'll be putting up a flyer after this podcast that will highlight those events.
And then too, you guys, for everyone that's watching, just make sure you support. I think it's very important that we show up to these events. You know, a lot of times we complain about things not occurring, but I think everyone has done a great job and continues to do a great job as the years progress. Creating more activities and more opportunities for us to participate in this celebration, in the Juneteenth celebration. There's even someone, shouts out to Unbothered Soul. There's someone that literally is launching their brand, their official brand launch for their business during Corell's Juneteenth celebration, or the event that Corell is putting on. Corell. So there are so many different things that are occurring. Make sure you support the businesses that are being a part of this as well. We need to show up big. So we're putting it in your hands to show up and really celebrate.
Let's do it. Well, again, we want to thank you, Mr. Richardson, for joining us today, providing that amazing insight from a historical standpoint about Juneteenth, but also locally. Just the work that you all have done to get us to this point. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you all having me. It was an honor to have this dialogue with you and have the dialogue with the two of you. I'm really, really proud. I can't express it enough.
Hey, it goes back to the village.
Right. This is the village in action, right? So until next time, you guys, take care and have a good night.
Peace.